Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday.
Here we are yet again.
First of the month.
Yep. It's the beginning of June. Can you believe it?
Oh.
My goodness, it's all going by so fast. Wow. Anyway, let's see. Oh, wow. We have like 10 people here. Hi, Veronica. Hi, Eloise, Naomi, John. Oh, Fran is here. Okay. Larry, you're here. Okay. Bernice Washington's here. Wanda's here. Betty. Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So here we are. So I got, this should be kind of interesting today. I've got a whole bunch of stuff to show you and share with you. And then this afternoon coming back, I've got actually quite a few pieces that people have sent me on both the girl with the pearl earring. We still have some of those, and some of those are really interesting. And then also the Degas piece. And so I wanted to show those as well. And there's some really good stuff going on and really interesting takes, on those two subjects. But I wanted to start off, and I wanted to share with you a place that you might actually look into. It's an amazing place. It's called La Posas, and it's in Mexico, and it's actually a garden. And it was a garden that was made in the early 1900s by a man by the name of Edward James. And Edward James was he was the son of an American industrialist. And he inherited a lot of money, and he ended up going down to Mexico and, buying this property. And, he basically created this garden. And I'm going to show it to you here just in a second. But when I saw this place, it's like no place you've ever seen. And so I'm going to begin, and I'm just going to kind of go through it. And I'm not going to talk a lot about, what we're looking at, but I'm just going to kind of flip through the pictures, and then I'll close this and we can all talk about it. Okay. So here we go.
And what is the name again, Charles?
It's Las Posas, P-O-Z-A-S.
Come again.
Oh my gosh.
So let's see if I can move this over here. There we go. Yay. Okay, I got it. Now I saw a video on this place, and it just kind of blew me away. But and these are not in any particular order. But again, I'm just going to kind of flip through these and let you take a look at some of the imagery. It's pretty amazing stuff. Now remember that this garden was basically made in the early 1900s. Okay? Now my understanding is that he at first started doing a lot of this architectural stuff in wood, but because of the tropical climate, the wood deteriorated very quickly. So he decided that he was going to make everything out of concrete. And so he worked with local craftsmen to develop all these architectural elements in concrete and mosaic tile. And
wow.
Yeah, it's just kind of mind-blowing,
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, obviously, he's somewhere down in central to southern Mexico, and, it's highly tropical, and there's a lot of rainfall down there. And
that's the entrance?
Yeah, that's the entrance to the garden. And there's, you know, there's all of these columns and spires and stairways, you know, that seem to go really nowhere. Um, but just visually, you know, what an amazing environment to kind of create.
Wow.
And so, you know, this stuff is, you know, it's architectural,
Mm,
but
I love that.
is that there's the or part of a fall. It's you know, waterfall, water feature, you know, with the natural rock in the place. And you know, but if you think about this, even though it's architectural and it's somewhat like really functional, you know, look at the artistry, look at the design. Um, you know, the sculptural aspects, you know, of this. And if you start looking at some of these architectural pieces, like these columns, and you've got this, you know, large mass at the top, which is this bowl shape, um, you know, and the engineering involved in trying to keep that upright, you know, this was not done sort of randomly. I mean,
Wow, that's interesting there.
yeah, I mean, somebody put a huge amount of thought and design, you know, into this. And, you know, even to sort of conceive of an environment like this. You know, you had to be highly creative.
Nice shot.
But just think, if you would, just for a minute, what it would be like to be able to get up every morning and walk through a garden like that. Now, I have no idea how large this is. You know, I'm guessing, you know, it's not a like a really expansive, huge place, but it's like everywhere you turn.
I
You
mean, these
know.
carvings look almost like plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's like every place you turn, you know, there's something to look at. There's something visually stimulating. And it just kind of gives you an idea of the possibilities of what we as a society could really make, you know, our environment look like, you know, if we wanted to. So I wanted to share that place with you, and then I'm going to stop the share now. Okay. So any thoughts on that?
It was beautiful photos. I loved them. And the way that some of the photos went up to the sky instead of just out.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Different dimension.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I like those upward shots, but I particularly like the ones that were when they were up at the top shooting down. So you can kind of see the layout and how all of that kind of fit together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thought I had was, you know, if I were living in that environment and they had the stairways, right,
Mm-hmm.
going up, how willing would I be to walk up those stairs? You know, I mean, you get great views up there, but I would be a little nervous. You know, there's no handrails, there's nothing secure, you know, and you're sitting there, you know, walking on these, you know, concrete stairways, you know, and you wonder how, you know, how
Steady.
Structural, you know, and how secure are those, you know, before you walk up them. But that's
I think if you lived there, you could go there every day and still see something different.
Yeah, I think, well, and, you know, just the fact that you're living there in a tropical garden and the plants are always changing and there's always new flowers and things like that. Yeah, it's an environment that continuously changes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Anyway, anybody else got any thoughts on that? Come on, let's hear something.
Where in Mexico did
okay,
you
I
say
got
they
something.
were?
It's called Las Pozas, LAS, and then POZAS, and
Oh, that's the name of the city, the area.
I know it's somewhere in central Mexico. I don't know what city it's near. Okay. I'll try to do some research and maybe I can tell you this afternoon. Okay.
There is plenty of videos about the place and so on Google.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, I watched something on YouTube and I mean, it's the first I'd ever seen or heard of it, but you know, what an amazing place. And, the narrator was giving a little bit of the history of the actual garden and a little bit about Edward James as you know, as an individual. And though he isn't really considered an artist, you know, he was supposed to be an eccentric, but you know, obviously a very creative mind. So anyway,
It's open for the public to go in.
yes, yes. Yeah, that's my understanding is that yes, the estate is open, that they give regular tours now.
Yeah.
And I think the narrator was saying that you know, they do maintain the architecture there, but they really don't do anything with the tropical plants. You know, the plants have kind of taken over, and they're just letting them do what the plants will do. So
That was my question. I was wondering if they maintained the planting, that they didn't overgrowth and overtake and hide some of those sculptures.
yeah, I don't think so. I think, you know, I think they let it be, you know, as natural, you know, as they can. You know, they just try to maintain the pathways and the architecture so that it's safe.
You think you would lose some of the visual of the architecture with the growth?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely, you know, in looking at some of those photos, you can see where the plants are definitely taking over and growing up and around some of this stuff.
Right.
It obscures it, but you know, you're in the tropics. What are you going to do? You know, it's one of those things where, you know, I think the plants themselves, you know, I think that was really kind of the key for him, was he wanted to create an environment, you know, that kind of reflected, you know, where the place was at. I'm going to share another shot. This didn't end up in the file. I don't know why it didn't, but where'd you go? Okay, here you go. No, that's not it. That one is. Yeah, now this is just a single. Whoop. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's cancel that. All right. I hit the wrong button for some reason. I do that. So yeah, this was one of my favorite shots, and this
That's
is
gorgeous.
yeah, this is like that water, you know, the waterfall that you saw is up here, you know, at the top, and then it goes down into, you know, this pool down there. And again, you know, you kind of see how the architecture, it kind of, at this point, you know, it just kind of melds into the jungle itself, you know, and the tropical environment that's there. You know, it would, for me, it would be one of those amazing places to be able to go to and take a paint box and spend a couple of days painting. You know,
Oh yeah.
you know, there's all kinds of stuff there that would be inspiring, I think. So anyhow,
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's your little trip out into the world today, right? Okay. So I wanted to share with you also, I came across two other artists, and these are both contemporary artists who are living today, and they have some incredible work. And for those of you who are oil painters in particular, you'll find their work really interesting. The first one, his name is Randall Sexton. So it's Randall Sexton, Sexton. And he's got some amazing stuff, very painterly. He also teaches. I came across him through Streamline Art Videos, and he actually has a video out, but right now Streamline has all of their videos up for viewing for free. You can go to their website and go and look at all the different instructors and people who've done videos with them over the years. And there's probably over 100. And these things last about an hour to an hour and a half. And so, you know, it's like a live demo, and they talk about their process, they talk about art. And so it's, you know, it's pretty interesting stuff. So let me show you a little bit about his. All right, and I got to close a few windows here because I got stuff getting in the way of everything else here. There we go. Yeah, okay. So he does landscape, he does figures, he does still lifes. And the thing that I really like about his work is I really like his use of color. I like his composition. You know, we talk a lot about composition. And I'm trying to show you pieces from artists in particular who have really, really strong compositional elements, you know, in their work, and are very, you know, they're good technical painters, but they're also very strong at designing their paintings in ways that make them kind of compelling and interesting. Okay. And, you know, if you look at this painting in particular, and I started off with this painting because I really love the color, but I also love the movement of the way he laid the paint down, you know, on the forms. And, you know, it's a very soft painting, you know, it's a nude, you know, it's a figure, it's very subtle, but none of the colors that you see, you know, on this figure would be what you would call a flesh tone. You know, there's oranges, reds, purples, blues, greens, you name it, it's on there, right? And yet you look at this figure and it's a figure, you know, there's, you know, you don't really doubt, you know, what the subject matter is or the credibility of it. You know, the anatomy, everything is correct. So you see the figure, and yet more important than what the subject is, it's really the use of color and the use of the brushwork and the energy and things that, you know, he put into this piece that I find, you know, really inspiring. You know, here's another one of his figures again. And, you know, this was probably, well, both, I'm kind of guessing, you know, in listening to the video that he was presenting, he does a lot of work from life. You know, he'll go out, do a lot of plein air paintings. He does a lot of painting from the figure directly. But, you know, his paintings, he'll work very, very small and very quickly. And then he'll go back to the studio and he'll do a more finished piece. You know, he won't paint over what he's got. you know, that stays intact. But then he'll take that as an inspiration to create a painting from. And my guess is that this is probably one of the pieces that he did from life, okay? Where the piece before, I think he probably did one from life, but then he went back in and he's pushed it, you know, and played with the color and things, and maybe even the composition a little bit. Here's one of his landscape pieces. And, you know, we talk a lot about composition, and Veronica, actually, this is a good one for you to look at, you know, because you were doing your beach, right? And notice where he placed the horizon line and how high it is in the painting. You get really very little sky, right? And then probably 2/3 of the painting, you know, from top to bottom is water. And then there's a, you know, an area below, which is really the shoreline. But how many straight level lines do you see in that whole painting? Yeah. There are really not any, you know. Even the horizon line is slightly higher on the left side than it is the right. You know, it's not really straight across. And then, you know, the way he brings the wave across, which to me, you know, it works. I probably would have done it a little differently and made a little more form or shape in it. It's a little too straight, and it kind of stops my eye right there at that wave and stops me from going back further. But everything else is sort of laid in at these angles that takes your eye, you know, back and forth in there. And so again, you know, composition and the color, you know, he very, very deliberately, you know, muted all of the color in here other than, you know, this one area right here. And notice how your eye kind of moves and you right into that point, and how that board takes you further out to the next figure out here, and then the wave. And then you just keep moving around in there very nicely. Here's another landscape. Now this looks like, to me, because of the brushwork, probably one of his plein air studies. You know, it looks like it was done outdoors. It looks, you know, it's small, I would guess, and very painterly. But again, you know, see how he probably pushed the color and, you know, to really break this composition apart and really put the things that are in the middle ground and background further back than these trees and this hillside. And so he was very deliberate about how he used his color in here. And he may not have seen it exactly that way, but, you know, he looked at it and said, okay, I'm going to have to do something here, you know, and I'm going to have to make a clear choice to separate my foreground, my middle ground, and my background. Here's another, again, just looking at the brushwork, you know, and the size of his signature. This is a fairly small painting. I would guess that this is no bigger than about an 8x10. Okay. And again, you know, very painterly. But again, you know, look at the compositional elements. Look at, you know, there's really no straight horizontal lines in here. You know, they're always slightly, you know, uphill, downhill, you know, and they bring your eye back and forth. And Eloise, you were talking, was it Eloise? No. Who was it? Somebody was asking me about clouds. Okay.
I was.
That was me too. And
Oh, okay. All right. But look at how he put his clouds in there, and how, again, you know, there's a strong angle and back, you know, so he uses those as a design element, you know, to keep the eye moving around and, you know, to break up those light and dark patterns. so that you get, you know, kind of a strong sort of triangular shape with the blue here. You get a strong diagonal here from this cloud to here. You get another area. So, you know, and none of them were balanced. You know, none of them are the same size. You know, he's very careful about, you know, making something more dominant than the other. Again, that keeps the eye moving. You know, it stops you from your eye from resting in one place in this painting.
He centered that mountain there more.
Here? Yeah,
Yes.
it did. Yeah, that seemed, you know, if you look at where that's sitting, you know, that really is kind of sitting, you know, it's left to right pretty centered, and I guess you could call it centered from top to bottom. You know, it's a big shape, but yeah, the center point is like right there. And so, yeah, it's pretty close to center. Okay, here's another. And again, you know, this looks like, you know, a plein air painting that was done on site and rather immediate and fairly small. But look at the use of value and his shapes and his composition. And if you look at this very carefully, okay, somebody, there we go. Sorry about that. You know, all of this area back here is in very strong light. And then this foreground area, you know, he's made completely in shadow. And it helps separate out those areas, you know, foreground, middle ground, you know, here, and then background. And it does, you know, it's got a nice sense of depth to it. You know, your eye moves into the painting and keeps, you know, flowing from this road, you know, moving in up the edge of the hill and then back, you know, through these trees and around again.
I think it's interesting that the foreground is, you really see the brush strokes, where you get to the background, it's just more even. Right.
Yeah, and again, you know, that's very intentional, I think, on his part. Again, you know, he's leaving more texture, you know, here in the foreground. And again, you know, it's like hard and soft edges. You know, harder edges and things come forward, softer edges tend to recede. And so, you know, he's blended things together back here to soften them a bit, where he's left it very direct up here. And that's really helped pulling all of that forward. This is one of my favorites that I've seen of his. And again, you know, it's very loose little painting. And I actually, I think I have it maybe in this collection right here. But I saw the finished painting of this. And what, you know, he's kept the composition basically the same, but the values and the contrast changed a lot in the final painting to be much stronger. So those darks and things got much darker, the lights got much lighter. But, you know, a really lovely little, you know, like I would say relatively quick plein air painting. And again, you know, your eye moves in, you know, up this tree, up the side, and back and forth. You know, and again, you know, he's really good at controlling his color, controlling his values, and composing and designing. You know, he's not just slapping something up there. You know, he's really thinking about, you know, how am I going to fit this into, you know, this canvas? You know, how am I going to design this? All right, so we've got 10 minutes. Let's see, how much more do I want to show you? Okay, so yeah, this is the last piece I'll show you of his. And again, look at the use of color in here. And again, you know, he has to, you know, he sees things while he's there, but then he knows as an artist with his experience that he really has to push those colors, you know, make them more exaggerated to, rather than just copy nature, you know, really make a strong statement, you know. So all of these shadows in here are all these violet colors, right? And then he kind of plays that against this turquoise, you know, and this kind of lighter yellowish sort of gray color in here. And again, look at the design of the painting. So it's, again, he's one of those people, I think, that if you wanted to study as far as, you know, what are they doing? You know, what are they doing to make an effective composition, and, you know, their use of color and their use of the media that they're working in this case, oil. You know, how could you apply that, you know, to your very own work, right? So real quickly, I want to go through the next guy because we are running out of time fast here. And his name is Ken Backhouse. And Ken Backhouse is, he's probably one of the better known artists working today, you know, contemporary artists. And he's an oil painter. And Ken, you know, Ken does a fair amount of painting from life, but mainly what you're going to see here are things that he did in the studio. And much like Randall Sexton, he uses his life studies not as a finished piece, but as sort of an inspiration to do a final painting. Okay, and so this is a finished painting. Now, the thing I like about Ken's work is there's this sense of accuracy about it. You know, you see a Victorian house, you see the garden, you see all of those plants, but then you really start looking at them, and there's almost like no detail. You know, it's very painterly. And it's just a suggestion. It's the suggestion that there's a house there. There's a suggestion that there's plants, you know, along the porch area, right? And again, you know, it's very, very painterly. And again, composition-wise, you know, look at how he's composed that. And then his use of color. Again, very, very controlled use of color. In value. Okay. Now that looks like a plein air study. And again, you know, using these shapes in here, you know, the rounds against the horizontal, the diagonal of the water, you know, leading in. Again, very, very conscious of the composition. You know, which is far more important, you know, than a lot of the things that we worry about, which is, you know, how am I going to, you know, get the spots on that rock, right? He doesn't worry about that. You know, it's, you know, he's worried about that big stuff, you know, the value, the composition of it. Okay. You know, pretty simple painting, you know, trees, right? And a pathway. And look what he does, though, to create this illusion of depth. He gives you these trees that are, you know, pretty much so in strong shadow, you know, here in the foreground and the middle ground. And then in the background, see, he changes the value range. You know, there's a lot of light, you know, back here in the background. And it takes you and it leads you between these two dark masses, you know, back to this light back there. You know, and very, very nicely done. You know, look at the color. You know, those trees, you know, when you look at them, okay, they're green trees, but are they? You know, there's oranges and browns and purples and blues and things, all within those areas that make up those trees in the shadow. And so, you know, he's really playing with color, and he's playing with, you know, the brushwork and the textures. Again, you know, he's suggesting that there's detail there, but he's not going in and tightening up any of that painting, really. You know, it's all pretty loose, pretty direct type stuff. You know, this little girl and her umbrella, and the effect of the light coming through that umbrella from behind. Just really nicely done. This was an interesting character. And again, you know, it was probably a life study. And, you know, clearly light is hitting the front plane of his face. Look what happens on the shadow side, you know, over in this area. You know, all of the color over here is very warm, you know, kind of reds, oranges, you know, things like that. And then you reverse that going into the shadow, and everything becomes much cooler in temperature, right? There's very little warm over here. You know, this is kind of a beautiful, you know, landscape. It's actually a nocturne. And so you get, you know, the moon, and it's coming through the limbs, you know, of that tree. But look at his use of color. And even though this is night, you know, rather than putting this dark, you know, blue sky in there, you know, it's softer. And there's, you know, he's played with the values and the contrast. And, you know, he's captured this very, very sort of soft, kind of dreamy, kind of romantic feel to it. And as far as creating depth, look at it, how he treated the values and the shapes, you know, back here in the background. He's grayed everything down, everything's softer. He gets to the middle ground. Again, it's a little bit darker, a little bit more contrast between the background and what's in the middle. You know, it's not as muted as back here. And then he's come a little further forward. Again, you know, a little purer color, a little more actual contrast in value. He's got some stronger darks, you know, nothing gets really, really light in these trees. And then he's come to the foreground, and look what he's done up here. You know, direct brushwork, you know, generally very dark value. And you see more texture, you see sharper edges to the way he's applied the paint. And that's drawn, you know, that area of the painting even closer to you, right? So there's these little subtle things, you know, but they give you this illusion, you know, of depth and distance. And then I wanted to show you this one as well. Now we have less than a minute. And like I said, when we come back, we're going to be talking about some of the things you guys sent in. But take a little bit of time, you know, look at some of these guys. And as you do that, also try, you know, try to look around and find artists that you really enjoy, you know, that your eye, you know, really catches your eye, that inspires you. And, you know, I pick artists each week, but don't be afraid or don't be shy. If there's an artist that you like, that you want to share with everybody, you know, send me a link, you know, or an email or something, say, hey,